James had always believed his life was ordinary, but in its simplicity lay a quiet contentment. Each morning, he would watch his wife, Emily, move through their modest kitchen with a soft smile, her hands brushing over the worn wooden counter as if it held every memory of their years together. She never demanded luxury, never hinted at dissatisfaction. She was the calm in his storm of ambition, the tether that kept him grounded. Friends often joked that he was lucky. Most men spent a lifetime searching for someone like her. Yet luck, he would soon learn, has a strange way of testing the heart. Emily's life, too, was quiet, her world revolving around small joys. The aroma of fresh bread, the laughter they shared over clumsy Sunday morning breakfasts, the gentle rhythm of their conversations that required no words. But beneath her humility, there was an unexpected spark of resolve, a resilience that James admired yet never fully understood. She possessed a secret patience, a quiet strength that would soon collide with forces neither of them could control. And then the unexpected happened. A sudden windfall arrived, as if plucked from the sky itself, a fortune that could rewrite the life they had built, for better or worse. It was a gift that promised freedom, yet whispered caution, carrying the weight of temptation and desire. James felt a mixture of awe and unease. He loved Emily, yes, but the money introduced shadows he had never imagined, stretching their trust and devotion in ways he hadn't anticipated. Among the whispers of fortune, another presence lurked. A woman whose ambitions were as polished as her smile, whose intentions seemed innocent, but whose eyes betrayed a hunger for what she could never rightfully claim. The seeds of betrayal were planted quietly, growing beneath the surface of their ordinary life, waiting for the perfect storm. James and Emily stood at the edge of a precipice, unaware that the life they had treasured could unravel with a single decision. Love, ambition, and loyalty would collide in a way neither had prepared for, and the question hung in the air. Would money reveal their true selves, or tear them apart forever? James and Emily's apartment was small, yet it carried a warmth that spoke louder than any luxury could. Faded curtains framed windows that overlooked the quiet street, where neighbors waved and children's laughter echoed in the late afternoons. The walls were lined with memories, photographs of birthdays, humble vacations, and candid smiles frozen in time. Every corner, every creaking floorboard seemed to whisper the story of their love. Simple, unremarkable to the outside eye, yet profound in its quiet devotion. Mornings were ritualistic, almost sacred. James would pour coffee into chipped mugs while Emily prepared toast, humming softly as if the melody itself could protect their fragile world from the chaos beyond. They spoke in small gestures, a brush of a hand, a knowing glance, exchanging a language only they could understand. Yet, even amid these tender routines, James felt a subtle restlessness. His ambition, once dormant, now gnawed quietly at the edges of his contentment. He loved Emily fiercely, yet he yearned for more. More recognition, more comfort, more the kind of life that could erase the invisible pressure he felt from friends who had climbed higher, earned more, or lived louder. Emily, ever observant, noticed the shift in his gaze when the conversation turned to colleagues, successes, or fleeting headlines of sudden fortunes. She said nothing, choosing instead to wrap her hands around her growing belly, imagining their child and the life that would come. Her patience was endless, her love unwavering, yet a quiet tension lingered, an unspoken understanding that their happiness, as it existed, was delicate. Evenings were gentle, marked by laughter over shared meals, whispered dreams, and the small, clumsy attempts of nesting in preparation for the baby. Emily decorated the nursery with thrifted furniture and hand-stitched blankets, each piece a testament to her care, her humility, her hope for a future that would be shaped by love rather than wealth. James watched her, pride and longing battling inside him. He adored her, yet the allure of a life beyond their means teased the edges of his conscience. It was in these ordinary moments that the tension quietly built, a fragile house of contentment, with cracks forming where ambition and temptation might seep in. James's admiration for Emily intertwined with a secret vulnerability, a susceptibility to the glittering promise of more. He didn't yet know how a sudden fortune could test him, how easily admiration could tilt into desire, how loyalty could be shadowed by the shimmer of wealth. Their ordinary life was a portrait of love at its simplest, yet the seeds of change had already been sown. Beneath the soft glow of lamplit nights and the quiet rhythm of daily rituals, an unseen force loomed, one that would challenge every principle, every bond, and every heart in ways they could not yet imagine. Emily had never imagined that a single letter could change the course of their lives. It arrived on an ordinary Tuesday, slipped under the door with a subtle weight that seemed heavier than paper should ever be. At first, she thought it was a routine bill or a mistaken delivery, but as she opened it, Her eyes widened in disbelief. The words on the page did not belong to her reality. She had been named the sole heir to a fortune beyond comprehension, $2.6 trillion. The number hovered before her like a star too bright to behold, dazzling and terrifying all at once. Her heart raced, a mixture of shock, exhilaration, and disbelief. She read the letter twice, thrice, as if repetition could somehow make the impossible possible. Images of a life unfettered by struggle flashed through her mind. The freedom to care for their child without worry, the chance to help others, the security that had always seemed just out of reach. Yet, amid the joy, a cautious thought anchored her excitement. James. She loved him too fiercely to allow money to poison their bond. She imagined his reaction, a mixture of awe and temptation, and resolved to shield him from the weight of such an unimaginable fortune until she could gauge his heart. For Emily, this inheritance was not about indulgence. It was about hope. Hope that their little family could flourish, that their love could remain untainted, that the gentle life they had built could grow richer without being corrupted. She dreamed of quiet moments amplified, not replaced. Laughter echoing in a larger home, walks in sunlit gardens, a nursery filled with love and opportunity. The money was a tool, a possibility, not a master. Yet even as she folded the letter and tucked it away in the safety of her nightstand, a subtle tension stirred. She felt a shadow, an unseen whisper of human frailty, threading through the joy. Money, she knew, had a peculiar power to reveal hidden desires, to tempt even the most devoted hearts. She did not yet know how James would respond, whether ambition or greed might slip quietly into the spaces between their shared glances and whispered promises. That night, as Emily lay awake imagining the life they could lead, she sensed that the world outside had shifted imperceptibly. The ordinary, safe rhythm of their days had fractured, replaced by the pulse of possibility and peril. The inheritance was a secret, a key to doors they had never dreamed of opening, and yet a silent question lingered in the shadows. Could love endure when wealth arrived uninvited, untested, and vast beyond comprehension? She arrived like a whisper, subtle at first, almost unnoticed, a stranger in the periphery of James's orderly world. Her name was Vanessa, and from the moment she stepped into a room, she commanded attention with effortless charm. Every movement was deliberate, every word measured to entice, to captivate. Her laughter had a magnetic quality, ringing with confidence and playful seduction, the kind that made people lean in, craving the warmth she projected. But behind the sparkle of her eyes lay a calculating mind, one honed for influence, persuasion, and the thrill of conquest. Vanessa was everything Emily was not, or so it seemed at first glance. While Emily's beauty lay in her quiet strength and selfless heart, Vanessa thrived on attention, admiration, and the power that came from being desired. Her ambition was shallow, glinting like gold in sunlight, driven by desire for wealth and status rather than love or loyalty. She had no illusions of tenderness or sacrifice. Her intentions were precise, her motives transparent only to herself. And yet, it was precisely this contrast, the radiant, reckless magnetism of Vanessa against the understated warmth of Emily, that began to tug at the edges of James's mind. It began subtly, imperceptibly, a lingering glance, a compliment that lingered longer than it should, a conversation that made James feel seen in a way he had forgotten existed. He did not act on it, not at first, but a seed had been planted, a curiosity, a temptation, a distraction. Moments he had once devoted entirely to Emily began to fracture, replaced by fleeting thoughts of what it might feel like to step outside the boundaries of devotion. He did not notice the gradual erosion of certainty, the way desire began to whisper that perhaps love alone was not enough to sustain a man of ambition. Emily, oblivious to the immediate threat, continued to nurture their quiet life, her heart full of hope, her mind untainted by suspicion. She could not have known that another presence, so alluring and deliberate, would soon test every promise, every bond they had built. Vanessa's influence crept like water through cracks in stone, subtle and relentless, challenging the foundations of trust with every smile, every perfectly timed interaction. And James, caught between genuine love and the thrill of temptation, faced the first real fracture of his heart. The question that now hung over him, and over their life, was perilously simple yet terrifying. Would he remain steadfast in devotion to Emily, or would the shimmer of ambition and desire, mirrored in Vanessa's calculating charm, pull him into a betrayal from which there might be no return? The stage was set, the tension mounting, and the first choice loomed like a shadow over the fragile world they had cherished. The moment came quietly, yet it shattered everything. James's departure was not dramatic. There were no raised voices, no visible conflict. Just a note left on the kitchen counter, the kind of sterile, impersonal message that somehow carried the weight of 1,000 broken promises. "I can't do this anymore," it read. Simple words, but they detonated in Emily's mind, echoing louder than any argument could. The man she had trusted, the man who had shared her mornings, her dreams, her quiet laughter, was gone. And he had gone not for ambition or necessity, but for Vanessa. Emily stood frozen, the letter trembling in her hands, her mind struggling to comprehend what reality had just rewritten. Her heart felt like a fragile bird, its wings broken before it had a chance to soar. She was pregnant, carrying the life of the love they had shared, and yet the very foundation of that love had been ripped away. Confusion, disbelief, and heartbreak collided in a storm inside her chest. She wanted to scream, to confront, to demand the truth, but her voice caught in her throat. There were no answers in the silence, only the cold, hollow realization that she had been replaced. Memories of their life together, simple breakfasts, tender smiles, whispered plans for the future, flashed violently in her mind, each one now tinged with betrayal. Every sacrifice she had made, every compromise, every moment of patience seemed to mock her. How could the man she had adored, the man she had believed would protect her heart, abandon everything for someone whose love was shallow and self-serving? Rage and sorrow intertwined, leaving her with a pain so deep it threatened to consume her entire. Yet beneath the devastation, a flicker of clarity emerged. Emily realized that the choice before her was no longer about the life she had shared with James, but about the life she would now build alone. The inheritance, once a quiet secret, had transformed from a dream into a shield, a means to protect herself and the child growing inside her. She understood, in a visceral way, that wealth could not mend a broken heart, but it could offer freedom, a freedom to redefine her existence without the man who had betrayed her. The world outside continued in oblivious rhythm, yet for Emily, everything had changed. Each familiar sound, each ordinary glance now carried the weight of absence and abandonment. She felt eyes on her, neighbors, strangers, her own reflection in the mirror, and wondered if anyone could understand the storm raging within her. The betrayal was not only James's departure, but the violation of trust, the erasure of shared dreams, the audacity of replacing profound love with hollow desire. And still, a question lingered, sharp and relentless. What would she do now? Would she crumble beneath the weight of heartbreak, allow grief to dictate her every decision, or would she rise, gathering the fragments of her shattered world to forge something stronger, wiser, and unbreakable? The story of Emily's life was poised on the edge of a knife, and the next step would determine not only her fate, but the fate of the love and trust that had once defined her existence. Emily's world had been reduced to quiet rooms and long shadows. The apartment that once hummed with shared laughter now echoed with emptiness, each creak of the floorboards a reminder of the man who had left her. Days blurred into nights, each passing hour heavy with the weight of betrayal and the looming responsibility of the life growing inside her. Friends tried to offer comfort, their voices warm but distant, unable to bridge the chasm between empathy and the stark reality she faced alone. Society, too, had its judgments, subtle glances and whispered speculations painting her as a figure of pity, a woman abandoned, a mother-to-be scarred by love's fragility. And yet, Emily endured. There was a resilience within her that refused to bow to despair. She moved through her days with quiet determination, preparing for a child she would raise with unwavering devotion. Each chore, each small act of care, folding baby clothes, arranging the nursery, measuring tiny socks, was a declaration of life in defiance of loss. Her grief was raw, but it did not define her. It sharpened her focus, tempered her spirit, and illuminated the depth of her capacity for love and courage. Loneliness pressed against her like a physical weight. Meals were eaten in silence, conversations with herself became habitual, and yet she found solace in small routines. A walk through the sunlit park, the rhythmic brushing of her hair, the soft hum of lullabies she imagined singing one day. Emily's pain was private, but her grace was public. She smiled when greeted, offered kind words to strangers, and listened patiently to friends' trivial woes even as her own world trembled. There was an artistry in her composure, a strength that radiated quietly, demanding neither recognition nor applause. Still, the inheritance lingered in the back of her mind, a secret promise waiting to be unfurled. Though she had yet to touch the fortune, she felt its presence like a heartbeat beneath her ribs, steady and insistent. It was not a solution to her heartbreak, nor a balm for her loneliness, but a latent force, a potential catalyst for transformation. She imagined what it might mean. The ability to provide for her child without fear, to create a life of safety and dignity, to reclaim agency over a world that had seemed determined to strip her of it. Suspicion, too, colored her thoughts. James's betrayal had left scars not just on her heart, but on her judgment of the world. She questioned the motives of others, analyzed every smile, every word, every gesture, searching for the hidden currents of selfishness that so easily swept people along. Her awareness became a shield, protecting her from further wounds, while simultaneously revealing the depth of her intuition and discernment. Yet even in her struggle, Emily's vision extended beyond survival. She dreamed quietly of a life where love, integrity, and generosity could flourish, untainted by deceit or ambition. The child she carried became both anchor and compass, a source of purpose that lent courage to her steps. She resolved, without speaking it aloud, that she would not merely endure, she would rise. The inheritance, vast and unimaginable, would one day allow her to reclaim her world, but that day had not yet come. For now, she moved through heartbreak and solitude with dignity, her spirit bending but never breaking, preparing silently for the moment when possibility would finally meet resolve. The shadows of betrayal still lingered, yet within Emily, a quiet fire burned, patient and unwavering. The journey ahead promised trials, revelations, and perhaps redemption. But for now, she survived, and in surviving, she began the subtle transformation that wealth alone could never teach. The day Emily finally accessed her inheritance felt surreal, as if the universe had paused to acknowledge the shift in her fate. She sat at her desk, hands trembling, staring at the screen that displayed the staggering sum, $2.6 trillion. Numbers that had once been abstract, unimaginable, now shimmered with a reality she could touch, direct, and wield. The weight of it was immense, yet it brought not chaos but clarity. In that quiet room, Emily felt a power that had nothing to do with anger, revenge, or entitlement. It was the power to shape her life, protect her child, and reclaim the dignity that had been stripped from her. She breathed deeply, aware that temptation lurked in every corner of possibility. But Emily's approach was careful, deliberate. There would be no displays of vengeance, no impulsive acts to shame or humiliate James. Instead, she envisioned a strategy rooted in quiet influence, subtle restoration, and thoughtful empowerment. Every decision she would make from this point forward would reflect the woman she had become, resilient, intelligent, and unshakably principled. The fortune was a tool, a means to an end, and she would wield it with precision, not passion. As she began to organize her plans, Emily realized the true extent of her independence. There were advisors, financial institutions, and legal structures ready to facilitate her control, but she wanted to be more than a passive participant. She pored over documents, strategies, and projections, learning the intricacies of managing such unimaginable wealth. With each insight, confidence replaced doubt. Her mind sharpened, no longer clouded by heartbreak or fear, but focused entirely on the potential before her. The inheritance was no longer a secret. It was an active force, ready to align with her vision for life, security, and justice without cruelty. The transformation was subtle yet profound. Emily began to see herself not as a victim, but as a woman capable of redefining her narrative. She considered her home, her community, and the people she loved, imagining how she could create meaningful change without ostentation or malice. Her child would grow in a world where opportunities were limitless, where security was guaranteed, and where lessons of resilience, integrity, and grace would be embodied in every choice she made. She smiled quietly, the kind of smile born from knowledge that strength comes from control, not chaos, and that empowerment is most potent when it is tempered with thoughtfulness. Yet even as she plotted her next steps, a shadow lingered, James. She had no desire to humiliate him publicly, yet a private anticipation stirred within her, the inevitable moment when he would recognize the enormity of what he had lost. That realization, she knew, would be more impactful than any confrontation she could orchestrate. Wealth, she reflected, was not merely a means of comfort. It was a lens, revealing the true nature of those who had walked away from love and loyalty. Emily's life had shifted irrevocably. The quiet, heartbroken woman who once navigated betrayal with trembling hands now stood on the threshold of extraordinary possibility. The fortune was hers, and with it came not only financial power, but the chance to craft a life of intention, dignity, and unassailable strength. Every plan, every action, every decision would now echo with the authority of a woman who had endured, who had risen, and who would move forward unshaken. And somewhere, in the quiet of the world outside, James would one day confront the stark reality of what he had abandoned. Though Emily, poised and unwavering, would no longer need him to validate her triumph. James had imagined that leaving Emily for Vanessa would be liberating, a passage into a life of glamour, attention, and unrestrained desire. At first, it was intoxicating, the thrill of her flirtatious smiles, the nights of lavish dinners, and the constant affirmation of being wanted. The apartment they shared was larger, more modern, adorned with luxuries Emily had never needed or sought. He told himself this was freedom, a reward for ambition, a taste of the world he had long fantasized about. Yet, amid the glitter and superficial laughter, a gnawing emptiness grew, subtle at first, then impossible to ignore. Vanessa's charm had been magnetic, but it was hollow, a mirage that faded under scrutiny. The conversations were shallow, the laughter forced, and the nights, though opulent, carried a weight that luxury could not erase. James found himself reaching for something missing, a presence that once grounded him, a warmth that had filled his home without any need for display or pretense. He realized, painfully, that the life he had abandoned, the life of quiet love, of loyalty and mutual respect, was irreplaceable. The turning point came with a whispered rumor, an article he stumbled upon late one evening. Emily had taken control of the $2.6 trillion inheritance. The numbers were unimaginable, a fortune that dwarfed anything he had ever seen or desired. At first, he could not process it, dismissing it as exaggeration, a misprint. But the more he learned, the more the weight of reality pressed upon him. The life he had forsaken, the woman he had betrayed, now held power and influence beyond his comprehension. The recognition of what he had lost was both humbling and tormenting, a moral reckoning he had long deferred. Guilt gnawed at him, a persistent shadow that haunted even Vanessa's laughter. Envy followed swiftly, a bitter companion that contrasted sharply with the warmth Emily had always offered freely. He tried to reach out, sending messages cloaked in feigned concern, orchestrating encounters under the guise of reconciliation. Yet Emily, now confident, composed, and resolute, met every attempt with subtle, controlled rebuffs. A nod here, a polite smile there, signals that spoke louder than words, conveying dignity, strength, and the clear boundaries of a life no longer vulnerable to manipulation. The contrast could not have been starker. James, once admired for ambition, now floundered amidst his own greed, weighed down by shallow desires and the consequences of betrayal. Emily, who had endured heartbreak and societal scrutiny, moved forward with patience, integrity, and measured action. Her life was expanding, empowered by wealth but guided by principle. His life, though outwardly luxurious, had contracted, confined by moral failure and the absence of genuine connection. Every day, James felt the sting of his choices. The parties, the attention, the hollow accolades, none could fill the void left by Emily's absence, none could restore the trust he had destroyed. The realization crystallized painfully. Love could not be bought, loyalty could not be faked, and ambition without conscience was an empty pursuit. The scales had shifted, and James found himself on the losing side, confronted by the very justice that had been delayed but never denied. And so he lingered in regret, watching from the margins as Emily's life blossomed with purpose and authority. Each calculated move she made, each moment of quiet triumph, reminded him of what he had sacrificed for fleeting desire. The narrative of greed versus integrity had been written, and he was painfully aware that he was no longer the author. Emily's world, once fractured by betrayal and heartbreak, now radiated with purpose and influence. The fortune that had seemed like a distant promise became a force for transformation. She invested in communities, built schools, funded hospitals, and supported initiatives that empowered women and families who, like her, had faced hardship. Every decision was deliberate, a blend of compassion and strategic foresight. The wealth was never a tool for vanity. It was a catalyst for change, a manifestation of the resilience, integrity, and patience that had carried her through the darkest hours. Her presence was felt quietly but powerfully. Charities she supported flourished under her guidance. Entrepreneurs and visionaries found her mentorship invaluable, her advice grounded in experience rather than ambition. Emily's life became a testament to the strength of character, showing that wealth, when coupled with principle, could ripple outward to impact countless lives. She moved through the world with the same grace that had defined her in solitude, now amplified by the ability to act freely and decisively. Meanwhile, James's world contracted in startling contrast. The social circles that had once lauded his charm and ambition began to scrutinize. The glittering parties, the admiration of peers, the shallow accolades, all proved ephemeral. Vanessa's influence waned, her attention fleeting and unreliable. Deals fell through, investments faltered, and whispers of mismanagement and poor judgment spread like wildfire. The man who had abandoned loyalty for desire now confronted a stark reality. The very foundation of his success was built on sand, easily swept away by the tides of consequence. James felt the sting of public scrutiny and the quiet humiliation of lost respect. Every failed venture, every social slight, Every reminder of Emily's rising prominence underscored the depth of his misjudgment. The fortune he had once dismissed or envied was now a mirror reflecting his own errors, illuminating the hollowness of ambition unmoored from integrity. Whereas Emily had grown stronger through patience and resilience, he was forced to navigate a shrinking world, plagued by regret and the awareness of opportunity squandered. The universe, it seemed, had balanced itself with precision. Emily's loyalty and fortitude were rewarded not merely with wealth, but with influence, impact, and moral vindication. James's betrayal, driven by greed and shallow desire, resulted in exposure, loss, and diminished standing. The contrast between their lives could not have been more stark, one flourishing in quiet power and purpose, the other dwindling amidst consequence and remorse. As Emily watched her vision unfold, she felt neither malice nor triumph in the traditional sense. Her satisfaction came from justice itself, from the undeniable affirmation that integrity and patience could withstand betrayal, that resilience could transform loss into opportunity, and that true wealth extended far beyond money. In the tapestry of their lives, the threads of karma, loyalty, and perseverance had been woven into a design that left no doubt. The universe, when given time and reckoning, had righted itself. Time has a way of revealing the truths that moments of passion, betrayal, or desire often obscure. Emily's journey had been one of love, heartbreak, resilience, and transformation. She had faced the ultimate test, the loss of trust, the betrayal of someone she had given her whole heart to, and the challenge of navigating a world that seemed ready to judge her for the misfortunes imposed upon her. And yet, she emerged not only intact, but empowered, her strength amplified by patience, integrity, and a quiet understanding of the power that comes from wise, deliberate action. Wealth, as Emily discovered, is not merely a currency of comfort. It is a tool, a reflection of character, a measure of how one chooses to wield opportunity. She had been granted a fortune beyond imagination, yet it was her values, her choices, and her steadfast love for her child that gave that wealth meaning. Where ambition had once led James astray, her patience and discernment had transformed possibility into purpose. The universe, in its subtle yet unerring way, had balanced loyalty against greed, integrity against desire, revealing that true power is rooted in conscience and courage. The lessons linger quietly, as all profound truths do. Betrayal may wound, but resilience can rebuild. Greed may seduce, but patience and moral fortitude endure. Love, tested and tempered, becomes a force that transcends hardship. Emily's story is not merely one of financial triumph or revenge. It is a testament to human strength, the capacity to rise above pain, and the wisdom to wield opportunity for good rather than selfish gain. As she gazed upon the life she had created, the nursery she had prepared, the initiatives she had launched, Emily allowed herself a moment of calm reflection. The child she carried would inherit not only wealth but a legacy of integrity, resilience, and empathy. And while the past could not be rewritten, the future stretched before her, full of promise and purpose. In the quiet aftermath, the story settles into memory like sunlight on still water, a narrative of lessons learned, of justice quietly served, and of a heart tested and proven strong. Emily had faced the storm, endured its fury, and emerged not merely surviving, but thriving, an enduring reminder that true wealth lies in courage, character, and the steadfast pursuit of what is right.